There's hope, dear, Mrs. Beaver says. Lots of hope. Yeah, Mr. Beaver goes on. There's a right bit more than hope. Aslan is on the move. And Mr. Beaver gives the Pevensey children the chance to digest this wonderfully grand news. But the children don't seem to react. Who is Aslan? Edmund finally asks. And Mr. Beaver thinks he's joking. He can't imagine someone not knowing Aslan. He's only the king of the whole wood, the top geezer, the real king of Narnia, he explains to the children. And that's how we become acquainted with Aslan, a character that can't be left out of this first series of screensavers. In the history of literature and movies, quite a number of characters have messianic features. In some way or another, they are modelled after Jesus. But none like Aslan the lion, and that's not a coincidence. To understand that, we should first visit Oxford and its picturesque pub, the Eagle and the Child. Some 100 years ago, that's the place where every Tuesday you would find several literature professors who were writers themselves. Among them, some world-famous authors like Tolkien and C.S. Lewis. In The Eagle and the Child, they would read each other's unfinished work and discuss it with one another. Lewis didn't particularly like Tolkien's The Lord of the Rings. Tolkien was not a fan of Lewis's Narnia Chronicles. But they shared a common goal with their stories. They wanted to stir up the Christian imagination. Many modern people have the feeling that the Christian message is irrelevant. They can't imagine anything when they hear the words sin, sacrifice and resurrection. Both Tolkien and Lewis wanted to change that by creating a fantasy world where you could discover the meaning of these words through the narrative. A definition doesn't appeal to the imagination, a narrative does. Knowing this, it's all too obvious in the first of the Narnia Chronicles, the lion, the witch and the wardrobe. Let's find out how in this story the three terms are presented: sin, sacrifice and resurrection. We get to know the four Pevensey children as they are sent to the countryside to escape the Second World War bombardments. From the beginning, Edmund, the youngest of the two boys, puts himself aside from the rest of the family. He refuses to obey, he goes his own way, and instead of hugging his mother when they say goodbye, he turns away from her. If you want to understand what Christians mean when they use the word sin, just look at Edmund. It starts with an attitude that distances one person from the rest, an attitude that disconnects. Edmund doesn't show any solidarity with his brother or sisters. Peter is a threat to him. Susan he ignores, and he has contempt for little Lucy. That's a fertile ground for sin to germinate. Or rather, using Narnia's imagery, he will be an easy victim to the Ice Queen, the White Witch. When Edmund arrives in Narnia, he ends up meeting the witch who offers him Turkish delight. Evil doesn't present itself as a horrifying demon. It's as attractive as Tilda Swinton and as sweet as Turkish delight. But it takes something else to really win over Edmund. The one desire that really drives him: to become the king and to humiliate his elder brother. As such, Edmund has done nothing wrong yet, but in a sense it's already too late. The witch has cast her spell on him, and that will be the trigger to his betraying his siblings. He disappears from the house of the Beavers, changing side literally to go to the Ice Queen's castle and give up his brothers and sisters. But for the time being, the crown he was promised and the Turkish delight he was expecting remain a faraway dream. Edmund is locked up in a cell, lonely, chilly, without hope, ice cold. That's how hell feels. Or at least that's how 14th century author Dante already described it. In his unsurpassed Divina Commedia, he writes about the abyss of hell as the place where sinners who committed treason are trapped in ice, and Satan is portrayed as a giant demon frozen mid-breast in ice. Trying to escape, he beats his wings furiously, creating an ice-cold wind. Now Edmund is trapped there. Does he still have a future? Contrary to Edmund, the other Pevensies are committed to one another. Peter feels responsible, Susan is like a caring mother, and Lucy is constantly trying to persuade the others to commit to the fate of Narnia. When push comes to shove, there's only one reason, though, for not returning to the normal world. They won't leave Edmund behind. But they're not capable of saving him on their own. They need Aslan for that. And even with his help, the situation is more complicated than they anticipated. After Edmund is reunited with his siblings, there is a confrontation between the witch and Aslan. The witch invokes Narnia's law, claiming that all traitors are to be hers. Pointing at Edmund, she says, "His blood is my property. That boy will die on the stone table." This is the moment for Aslan to show his messianic character. Of course, he's a ruler, strong, wise, unbeatable. But now he strikes a deal with the witch, a secret alliance that will turn him into a meek lamb, a lamb that will be taken to the slaughterhouse. Aslan is giving his life in return for Edmund's. His ascent to the stone table is painful to watch. The image of noble goodness is completely surrendered to the brutal violence of the hideous accomplices of evil. Humiliation is complete when his lion's mane is shaved off. You can see the desperation in the eyes of Lucy and Susan when they witness how the White Witch stabs Aslan to death. If you want to understand what Christians mean when they talk about Jesus' sacrifice, just look at Aslan. He gives his life for Edmund, just as Christ has died for our sins. Next thing you know, the battle between good and evil begins with Peter taking Aslan's place among the good guys. When you know about Saint Peter's role in the New Testament, you understand that the oldest Pevensy's first name is not without significance. In the meantime, something spectacular happens at the stone table. Lucy and Susan are alone with the dead Aslan. When day breaks and they're leaving the scene of the tragic event, they hear a crack and notice that the stone table has been broken and Aslan's body has disappeared. The tomb is empty. That's what the women discover when they want to embalm Jesus' dead body on Easter morning. Mary Magdalene even meets the risen Jesus. Likewise, Lucy and Susan watch Aslan appear in the sunlight, completely recovered, his proud mane waving in the wind. He explains to the bewildered girls how deeply his resurrection is connected with his sacrifice. When a willing victim that has committed no treachery is killed in a traitor's stead, he says, the stone table would crack, and even death itself would turn backwards. Sometimes the Christian gospel of the resurrection is regarded as good news for the deceased, that is, life after death. In fact, something else is at stake. It's good news for those who are left behind. Like Aslan, the risen Jesus actively contributes in the battle of good against evil in our world. And without him, evil would be invincible. Edmund's treason, an image of sin. Aslan's death, an image of sacrifice. his return, an image of the resurrection. That's how The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe appeals to the Christian imagination. Now, we've already looked at the Lion and the Witch, but we haven't said anything about the wardrobe. The intriguing gateway between two worlds, or rather two universes. The end of the first Narnia chronicle makes it very clear. These are two completely separated dimensions. In the kingdom of Narnia, the four Pevensies have grown. At the end of their stay, they're adults. But when they return to our world, tumbling out of the wardrobe, they're children again. Years have passed in Narnia, no time at all has in our world. Parallel universes have been a topic of discussion in the world of physics and other sciences for centuries. For the time being, there is no proof for their existence, but it's a field where the sciences and the imagination seem to intertwine. What if our form of existence is not the only one? What if there is contact between the different universes? For C.S. Lewis, the parallel universe is not a means to run from our reality. His remarkable way of looking at time in his chronicles makes that very clear. Their time in Narnia does not mean the Pevensey siblings can outrun the horror of the Second World War. What they do find over there is their final destination. As sons of Adam and daughters of Eve, they're destined to assume responsibility for the world they were entrusted with. The fauns, the dwarfs, the centaurs, and all the animals of the forest count on Lucy, Susan, Edmund, and Peter to safeguard the life in Narnia. "We're not heroes," Peter says when Mr. Beaver tells them about their destination. Slowly but surely, though, they will discover that this is, in fact, exactly their vocation. And that's why they return to our world changed, new. Thanks to the wardrobe that gave them access to the other world, they're in touch now with their true identity. Are there any such wardrobes in the real world? The idea reminds me of the Church of St. Ignatius in Rome. It has a wonderful ceiling painting that works as a so-called trompe-l'œil. You have the impression that there is in fact no ceiling at all, just a perspective of heaven. A gateway to the other dimension. The 17th century painter depicted the continents, known to him at the time, in their ascent to the other universe. And the promise is that every human being will find his true identity there. Heroes and princes we will be. The last book of the Bible articulates it like this: Jesus made us to be a kingdom and priests to serve his God and Father. Could it be that we are Pevensies too?